Up next, what can I say? When we have persevered, we have an inspiring story to share. But where do we start? What Can I Say will help attendees prepare to share their testimony by learning the basics of public speaking. Caroline is a certified peer specialist and training facilitator. She is passionate about bringing hope and encouragement to others and is grateful for the opportunity to present to her peers. Please join me in welcoming Caroline to Real Voices, Real Choices.
Hi, I'm Caroline Cooper. I'm a certified peer specialist, which means that I have a lived experience with mental illness. Today, I'm going to be doing something a little different than some of the other presentations I've given, and that is I am going to teach you about sharing your story more than me sharing my story. I think that being able to share with others what we have been through in our lives is very powerful. It's rewarding for you, and it's also encouraging to others. In fact, I really have two main reasons that I think we need to be sharing our lives, sharing our stories with other people. First is to offer encouragement. There are a lot of hurting, broken people in this world. And especially after the year we had with 2020, there are people who have a new perspective of mental health and wellness. And I want them to realize that I want them to be encouraged that they can move past that. The other thing is I want us to continue working at reducing the stigma around mental illness. I think there's been a lot of progress over the years, and I believe very strongly that more progress can be made. And I think we have a little bit of a responsibility as people who live with a mental illness or who work in the mental health field or are just someone who's interested in mental health and wellness in general. I think we have a responsibility to be out in the world, sharing our lives, sharing our stories with others. It is so possible, very possible, to live a full and happy and productive life, even with a mental illness. And that's what I want to do today, is help you to feel comfortable learning what to say, how to share, and I hope that you will get some benefit out of that. We will have a chat going, and so if you have any comments or questions during the presentation, please post them in there, and I'm going to leave time after this recorded portion to go back through the chat or to just address any questions that you may have. Also, throughout this presentation, there are some exercise slides. So I hope you will download and open up the attachment with the handout that I've prepared so you can take some notes or follow along with this presentation. So here's what we're going to do today. We are going to learn how to share our story. We're going to talk about the audience that you may be interacting with, talking about preparing for the presentation. We have to talk a little bit about communication also, and actually creating a specific style of presentation. But before we go any further, I'm going to give a little example of what it means to share a story. Now, this is a pretty condensed version, but it's important for me to do that so you know where I'm coming from, and maybe give you some ideas if you only have a few minutes and want to just quickly share a little about your life with someone. So if you look over on the left side of the screen, the first picture you see over there are these two smiling kids. I don't know where they went, but right now, that was about 40 years ago. My husband and I, we met in college. And so that picture shows us smiling and happy. We met each other, we fell in love. We knew we were going to spend our lives together. And right next to that is a picture of us on our wedding day. What you don't see in this picture is that I was living with undiagnosed mental illness, depression, anxiety at one time. More recently, it was thought I had bipolar disorder, then it went back to a depressive disorder. I mean, sometimes the diagnosis is hard to come up with. But the reality is, during my growing up years, I was not very mentally, emotionally healthy. I thought going away to college, meeting my husband, getting married, I thought all of those things, those problems would just melt away. It was just childhood stuff. I isolated, I was very shy, I had lots of mood swings, lots of things going on, and I just knew that I could start fresh as a young married woman. Well, that wasn't quite true. In the middle of the screen, you'll see a picture, and I have the date outlined. It's July 2nd, 2002. That's me and our 4 children. Again, we're smiling, we're happy, we're on vacation. We did a lot of fun vacations together, but I can tell you that they weren't always the happiest. 2 months, 2.5 months after this picture was taken, I was in a 10-day outpatient treatment program for severe depression and PTSD. I had also been abused as a child and carried that trauma with me. Again, something I thought, I'm just going to set that aside. I'm not going to deal with it. And it all caught up with me. So in 2002, I had a breakdown and I entered this 10-day outpatient program. It was life-changing for me. I believe strongly that God worked through that experience. He brought me through a healing experience and a time of recovery. I spent several years really in pretty intensive treatment. And a few years later, I wrote a book about that experience. Then I started a ministry, a nonprofit. I've been doing speaking. I've had wonderful opportunities to kind of give back, to share some of what I've learned, again, to encourage you, to encourage others, and to help reduce the stigma. And ever since then, things have been perfect. No, not at all. That's got to be part of your story. You will probably have setbacks. The key is knowing how to persevere and get through them. In fact, I just recently started back to therapy. It was a rough couple of years for me. 2020 was hard for a lot of people, and I had other situations coming up. So part of your story has got to be kind of the ongoing recovery that you walk through every day. The last picture, the big picture over there on the right side of the screen, that is my family today. We took that just a couple of weeks ago when we all were able to get together. My husband and I are on the couch. My 4 kids, 3 spouses, 3 grandchildren are all in that picture. And yes, we are all smiling. But this time I can say that we all are pretty happy. Life is not perfect. And several members of my family, 3 of my 4 children, have pretty significant mental health issues, and spouses that also have some concerns. It is a situation, it is an issue in my family. From my parents, from their parents, it is something that has affected us. But I think we're stronger for it. I think because we have had to learn how to live with mental illness, we've had to learn to be patient and loving and accepting of each other. We've had to help each other persevere through hard times. And because of those struggles, like I said, I really believe we are a stronger family. We genuinely care for each other, we love each other, and we want each other to be healthy. That really is why I'm so passionate about sharing your story with others, so they can see that life can be really good, even with a mental illness or an addiction or whatever it is that you struggle with. We can find a way to enjoy the life that we are blessed with. So let's get going. And the first thing we need to talk about is actually sharing your story. You have to know what to say and what not to say. And I think a lot of times we focus so much on wanting to share our story that we just blurt it all out. That's not always the best approach. So before you actively start making deliberate efforts to share, think about what you want to say. Do tell a story. Be honest and informative. Share your challenges and when did you recognize that need for recovery. Emphasize the success you've had and offer encouragement. Again, there's that encouragement. But a disclaimer before I really go any further. You need to be in a place where you are ready to share. In other words, if you can't share your story without breaking down or without traumatizing yourself or having flashbacks or any other emotional responses that are unhealthy for you, you may not be ready to share your story. I had to get to a place where I could talk about my childhood, the mental illness, my postpartum depression that I had at one time. I had to get to a place where I could share those things without being kind of a blubbering mess. You need to be ready. You need to have accepted the past, accepted the fact that you have something you need to continually deal with in life. At least for most people, it is an ongoing journey to live with mental illness. You need to accept that part of who you are before you can share it with others. So don't rush into sharing your story. Take some time, think about it. Make sure that you are ready to share. Now, a lot of times we don't talk about what we shouldn't say, but I think this is as important as knowing what to say. Probably one of the most important things to remember is not to compare yourself with others. When you are telling your story, it's not the time to say, well, my problems were so much worse than so-and-so's. Now, everybody's problem is their problem, okay? You don't want to compare. You don't want to say, well, I got well in 3 months and so can you. And no, for some people, it may take several years. Everyone's journey is the same. Don't compare yourself with others. Focus on your story that you're telling and not comparing with others. Also, the next couple kind of go together. Don't play the blame game and don't be disrespectful of others. Sometimes it's very easy to say things like, well, my mom abused me, or my uncle made these moves on me, or, well, I only have this illness because it's come through the family. You know I did those things before I really started going through my recovery time. But when you're sharing your story, remember, it's to encourage others. It is not to blame others. It's not to potentially cause harm or hurt other people in your story. And then the last thing I have there is to do not promote any treatment options over another treatment option. I had someone tell me once, well, you can do this. You can take this approach that does not require any medication. And I know you can do it. I've done it. Others have done it. Well, for me personally, I do take medication. I've tried without medication. And believe me, my family lets me know to go back on it. Everybody has their own unique treatment plan. And telling your story is not an opportunity to advocate for one form of treatment over another. Again, it's simply your story that you're sharing. I probably will say that a lot. It's your story. It's personal. So this is the first of our little exercise pages. And what we're going to do is through the presentation, I'm going to show you the exercise page. It's part of the handout. And I'll give you a couple of examples, and then we will have time at the end of this presentation. My goal is that we will have time to go through these exercises again after the recorded portion. But I want you to be thinking about some of the things we've just talked about. What are 2 or 3 of the key successes you want to share? As some examples, first of all, let me look at my deal. For me, the first success I had was in completing the 10-day outpatient program, because while I was there were a couple of people who came in and then left before they completed the program. So that was a success for me. Another success was that I went through a Christian 12-step program. So I went through the entire 12 steps. I continued to reflect on those steps in my life, and it was a very important activity for me to do. So that was a success. Another success is that I recognized the need to get help again. It's important, it's ongoing. But think of some things in your life during your recovery, during your treatment program? What are some things that you were successful at that you can share as encouragement? And what are some things that are really not necessary to share or that should kind of remain confidential? For example, I will never reveal the name of the person who sexually abused me as a child. There's no reason to include that person in my story. It doesn't do any good. So I'm not going to. You may have developed an unhealthy coping skill at one time to deal with your issues, a habit or something that simply was not healthy, was not good for you, was not good for others. You may not want to reveal the specifics of that. That's okay. You don't have to. You can simply say, I had an addiction, or I had a problem, or an unhealthy habit, or something like that. You don't have to reveal every single thing about your life and your journey. You want to focus on those things that will encourage. All right. So we talked about your story, what types of things to say, what types of things not to say. And now it's time to kind of look outside of us and think about who are we going to be speaking with. Decide how you are comfortable sharing. Now, I have a little note down there that says public speaking is not for everyone. That's okay. It really is. But I've tried to put this presentation together in a way that if you just simply are at a point that you want to tell your best friend who doesn't know about your journey, then maybe you'll feel more comfortable doing that after we have this little time together today. This is hopefully going to be something beneficial to you, whether or not you just are interested in one-on-one little conversations or groups or conferences. This is just to kind of get you thinking about what kind of environments are you looking for to share your story, or are you comfortable in sharing your story? So there's three different audience types that I've identified here. First is a kind of a one person or one or two people. It's a conversation. When you're sharing with someone, whether it's planned ahead of time, like, hey, let's go have lunch, I want to share my story with you, or whether it's in the moment, someone is crying and you approach them and an opportunity comes up to share, whether it's that kind of informal, very personal interaction, that's a beautiful way to start sharing your story. Maybe you are part of a small group, a support group, a mothers of preschoolers, MOPS group, a social club of some kind where they are looking for speakers. Maybe this is an opportunity to go into a small group. Maybe it's a Sunday school class. There's all kinds of small groups that you could be a part of that might be interested in hearing your story. What I encourage you to do in this kind of setting is to have more of a question and answer type back and forth, not quite as casual as a conversation with one or two people, but still informal enough that they can feel free to ask questions as you're going through the presentation or going through your sharing time. Then there's more large groups. Like, I consider this a large group, even though I am the only one here in my house doing this presentation to my computer. Large groups, giving that testimony is a wonderful thing to do if you're comfortable and ready to do that. And I look at that as more of sharing a testimony, or like in this particular case, I feel like I am in a teaching mode more than sharing my testimony today. In this kind of setting, I'm not giving you opportunities to ask questions throughout. But as I said, I'm hoping we have some good time at the end to really talk about some of the things that I'm showing you today, getting some insights from you, maybe even having an opportunity for some of you to share just a few minutes of your story with us. Large groups are a little different than the more casual conversations that you might have. So let's think about this, knowing your audience. okay? Um, Exercise, know your audience. What individuals need to hear your story? Now, you may not be able to come up with anyone right now, and that's okay. You may not know who needs to hear your story. You may not have anyone in your life who is showing signs that they are on a similar journey and needs to be encouraged by your story. That's okay. But be thinking about it. As I was preparing this presentation, I thought, my adult children don't know all of my story. I don't know if it's necessary for them to know all of my story, but there are some things I haven't shared that maybe it would be beneficial for them to hear because of where they are in their lives right now as well. I know when I first went through this time of recovery, nobody knew that I was having problems. I had to take time to share with a high school friend, my best friend from high school. I had to go back to her. I felt that it was necessary to go back and share with her what had been going on in my life that she never knew. That's the kind of individual I'm talking about. Someone who you want to share with, and maybe needs to hear that to get to know you better or to be encouraged because of their own situation. As far as small or large groups, it's kind of like I said before, there are all kinds of opportunities for you to be involved in a group, and look for opportunities there in those groups. What kind of groups are you involved in? Do they need someone to share? Is it an appropriate place to share a little bit of your story? So think about those things. And I hope that you have an opportunity to not only think, but to be jotting down some of these ideas so that you can refer back to them later. Okay. Now, we're building as we go. We've talked about kind of a little bit of the content. We've talked about where we might be sharing. And now we're going to talk about how we actually prepare to share our story. And the first thing is, as you know, this is your story. First thing I want to ask you is, have you ever written your story? Have you ever journaled your story, maybe even in little pieces and chunks? I encourage you, before you say a word to anyone, I encourage you to write your story. Things may come out in writing through your events of your life. Things may come out that you didn't remember before, or you may get some new insights about, here's why I felt that way. Here's why I did this. It is, for me anyway, writing out my story is so beneficial. It's a healing experience, but it also has helped me to identify some things that I do want to share, as I've learned through that. So I encourage you, write out your story. And then maybe read it through, consider what is the appropriate content to share or not to share. And then there are ways that you can actually prepare to give the presentation once your content is a little bit more fleshed out. First of all, there are 3 suggestions I have here. One is to prepare an essay. And that's similar to writing your story. The only thing about that is when you're writing out your story, don't limit yourself to page numbers or how many words you're going to use. Just write. Pour out your heart. When I'm doing that kind of thing, it also turns into like a prayer, for a prayer of gratefulness, or because of how God has brought me through the events in my life, a prayer for help to help me continue going through and taking care of myself. But writing it out is wonderful. Doing an essay is where you specifically write out the amount of content that you would need depending on the time that you have to share. So an essay or written story is one thing. In fact, I've known people that when they have done their sharing or their speaking in public, they do use a written out version of their story because they want to stay true to what they want to say. They don't want to get off track. They don't want to go down rabbit trails or anything like that. So they have it and they read it, and that's totally okay. There is nothing wrong with that. Again, it's your story presented in a way that works for you. Sometimes you might use an outline, and I will tell you that that's kind of my approach. I have my little notes here, and to kind of keep me on track a little bit, remind me of some things I want to say. That's a simple approach that you can use. Or some people use note cards where they just put some key phrases or keywords on different note cards as they go through the presentation. With different sections of the presentation, they have a different note card for each little part of their story. That's another thing you can do. But I also invite you to set a goal of memorizing your story. Again, it's your story. The only time I think it's really necessary to have to have it written down and to have notes and things like that, is if you want to incorporate other things into your story, like lessons or applications of some kind. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this is your story. And work on it, prepare it, put it together in a way that really demonstrates how you have taken this journey. And then practice. Now, this is really for if you're going to be speaking at a small group or a conference or something like that. This is really when you should practice. Now, it's okay to practice anyway. Even if you're going to spend 2 or 3 minutes with a friend or whatever, you can always practice. But specifically for more in a group setting, you want to be aware of your timing. A lot of times I will put a time mark on each slide or each section of a presentation so that as I go through, I can kind of monitor where I am time-wise. So that's one thing you can do, is to be mindful of the time that you have allotted for giving your presentation, sharing your story. And as I said, share in the moment, that simply means, you don't have to be as concerned with timing, but you do need to be aware of, the time that you may have sitting at dinner with a friend that wants to hear your story, sharing in the moment. So the exercise for this is really what I consider a very important part of this presentation today. So I'm going to spend a few minutes on this. To prepare, this is an outline that I suggest, maybe not consecutively like it is here, but this is the content I suggest that you work on putting together when you're taking your story and turning it into more of a presentation or a testimony for someone else to hear. So the first thing, your introduction, you always want to start like I started, told you my name, told you I'm a certified peer specialist. Because I'm trying to be a little concise, I didn't include a lot of other qualifications and such today. So again, this kind of depends how much time you have on how much personal intro you want to do in your presentation. The next thing, before the fall, is the way I look at this. What was going on in my life before I came to that aha moment when I knew, oops, something really is wrong. I really do need to get some help. What was going on in my life before then? Well, as I shared with you, I was sexually abused as a child. I also had untreated mental illness, unrecognized, was going through denial. All of those things were going on in my life. And you can keep this part of your sharing as minimal or as specific as you want. How important are these events in what you want to share with the people who may be listening to you? So before the fall, what are some things that you might write down there? And I am going to turn to my notes, give you some of these examples as we go. One of the things I put down for the before the fall kind of content is that, in addition to what I've already shared, I was very insecure. Even though I excelled at school, was valedictorian, got high honors in college, all of these wonderful successes. So that part of my life was, hey, pretty good. But the other part was no. I was very isolated and insecure and very moody, pretty much what a person looks like who is depressed and not getting any kind of help for the problem. It does not go away on its own, depression or any mental illness. It simply does not go away on its own. It needs to be addressed. So before I came to that time, I really was struggling emotionally. The turning point. Okay, I do believe that there is that aha moment or hitting rock bottom. There is something that happens in life to get your attention. Now, maybe for some of you, you had family who were aware that you were struggling and helped you get some counseling or therapy or medication at a young age. Maybe you didn't have a lot of time without help. And that's great. But there still was a time when you accepted that for yourself. I'm sure there must have been. So when did you accept for yourself that getting help was the only solution to getting past the problems? Like I mentioned in my story, that turning point came for me after I spent several months in and out of my bedroom, in my bed. And I knew that things had to change, and I did nothing to change them. On the day when I went into the outpatient program, what happened for me there, and I'll just tell you a little bit about this turning point part of my story. I had been in bed on and off for several months. On this particular day, I was depressed, I was crying as always, and I just felt that life had no meaning for me anymore. Something was wrong. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to tell because I didn't want to tell anybody what I was feeling. And for me, I believe that it was God speaking to me and revealing to me that He had a plan for my life. And that's something I want you to think about in your story. What purpose do you have in life? Because when we realize we do have a purpose, you do, I do, when we have some kind of a purpose in life, that makes things look a whole lot different. Well, God revealed to me that He had a purpose for my life. And in the middle of my room, I was broken down, I was in tears, I didn't know what to do. And I thought, I'm going to go to that therapist that I had seen for a while before I stopped going. I think I'm going to go back and talk to her. So I got in my car, I made the appointment, got in my car, and on the way there, I was still depressed. I knew a change needed to happen. On the way there, I thought, it would be so easy to just drive into oncoming traffic. Now, let me stop there. You may not want to include those kinds of details in your story, depending on who you're talking to. But I feel like I can share that with you because you're here at this conference and you've been through experiences of your own, and I know that. But those kinds of details, really consider if it's appropriate to share with others. You don't want to bring trauma to someone when you're sharing your story. You want it to be encouraging. They need to know the down so they can appreciate the recovery side of things. But consider carefully what kinds of things you share. Now, back to the story. So I made it to the therapist's office and I could not speak because I was crying so much. I literally could not speak. So as I sat there crying, and she was saying, okay, I think you need more help than I can give you here. And she recommended the program that saved my life. I truly believe it did. That was my turning point, was that I need help. I really need help. Think about that turning point. That's going to be a highlight of your story, because I think it's important for people to hear that we have a choice. We do. We have a choice in how we behave, in how we respond to the circumstances around us. I made a choice to try to get help. And I am guessing that most of you here today have made that choice as well, that you want more from life than just living with this mental illness and letting it affect every part of who you are and what you do. You want more than that. That's why you're here. So find that turning point. Let it demonstrate really what we're trying to accomplish as people who want to live a life of wellness. Okay, so going on, encouragement, where you found support and assistance. I do have another story I want to share about that. I had lots of support, but when I first went through that outpatient program, I had not told, again, I didn't tell people this was going on in my life, not at all. So that's why I think it's important to understand it's okay to wait until you are ready to share. I waited until I was ready to share. But on one particular day, I was at the hospital going through the treatment program. I came home at night since it was outpatient, and my son said, "Mom, your dad called." And I told him you were still at the psychiatric hospital. I said, "Oh, why did you say that?" Because I hadn't told them. My son said, "He's your dad. I thought he would know." Wow. Get the support you need. Tell the people you know you can trust what's going on in your life so they can help you. And as part of your story, I think it's really good to include mentioning the people, maybe not by name, again, that's your choice, but include people that have helped you, include where you received the help that you need. Help people realize you were not totally alone on this journey. The next one, healing and recovery, your ongoing recovery process. Again, like I said, I don't know anyone who went through a traumatic event, decided to get help, has entered recovery, and has never had any problems again. I would love to meet that person and find out how that happened for them. But for me and for most people, it is a journey. Life is a journey. It's filled with ups and downs and curves and bends and all kinds of things. And we're going to have that in life, whether or not we have a mental illness or an addiction or any other events in our lives that can cause us pain. That's going to happen. Life is filled with ups and downs. Reflect that in your story. Let people realize that it's okay to have those ups and downs. The key is trying to be prepared for it. Share with the people listening what you do to prepare. That's part of that encouragement side. How do you live with this condition? What are things that you do? How do you stay healthy? How do you stay mindful of your condition? Share those kinds of things. That's encouraging for people. Another thing that it does, I've talked a lot about the encouragement side, but on the helping to reduce stigma side, when someone hears your story and sees and hears that you love life, that you have purpose, that maybe you work, maybe you have a family, maybe you are part of a skiing club. I don't know, whatever it is you do in your life, let people know that you can still do all those wonderful things in life. You can have full, meaningful life. You can have friends, family, others around you to support you. You can have all those things and still live with a mental illness. To me, that's why there's so much stigma at times, is I think a lot of people in the world look at someone, and if they know they have a mental illness, they think, if there's that old, well, they are mentally ill. No, I am a person with a mental illness. That's the kind of shift we want to see happen, is to take the identity off of our diagnosis and put the identity back on me as a person. I just happen to have this condition. Here's what I'm doing about it. And share those kinds of thoughts with the people you're sharing with. This is your story. You're a unique, beautiful individual. This is just part of your life. Okay, so make sure that that part of your story gets across when you're telling it. You are more than this condition that you live with. Okay, and then finally, the final words of encouragement to inspire hope. One of the things I would say for my encouragement is that it is possible to learn to live with a mental illness. I've accepted my past. I love my life. I'm trying to be prepared for the next setback that comes along. I like music. I like to play cards. I mean, there's a lot about me and who I am that has nothing to do with living a mental illness. That's just part of my life. And, I think it's important to have in your story, to weave through there, to remind them that you are sharing as an individual, as a person who just happens to have this condition, and here's what you've done about it. Here are the choices you've made. Here are the events that happened. Here's how you learned to persevere. So I think that this particular exercise page is going to be very helpful. Again, if you've written out your story or journaled through parts of your story and use this to help narrow down your content to what you want to share, I think this can maybe be a good resource for you. Again, this doesn't have to be completely consecutive on how you share. You may want to organize your testimony, your sharing in a little different way. That's okay. However you present it is up to you. Okay, it's something personal for you on how you want to share. Now, creating a presentation. I have 3 suggestions here. We're really not going to spend much time on this, but I just kind of have 3 ideas of how you might present your presentation. First of all, you can do a personal approach, or you can do what I consider an application-based approach or a teaching approach. So let's quickly go through those. The personal approach is just simply sharing your story, emphasizing that there is hope for healing and recovery. Kind of the things that we just talked about would be really focusing on that personal aspect of your story. No agenda, no anything beyond just sharing. Application-based. This is when I've done presentations where I've tried to help people realize that they could find hope, experience transformation, recognize victory. That's one of the presentations I've done before. And so as I was telling my story, I was also pointing out where they can find hope in that, how they can be transformed, how they can be transformed, how they can experience and recognize victory in life. So, you can find other themes, applications to weave into your story. That's another approach that you could take. Another one is teaching. Now, I consider today this is more of a teaching presentation because I'm sharing a little bit of my story as I go along, but I'm sharing it also to demonstrate what it means to share. And I'm using this as an opportunity for teaching. Now, the only thing I don't have any educational handouts or references because I didn't use any in this particular presentation. But if you did go to more of that kind of a research teaching presentation that includes your story, you want to provide those kinds of things if you can to supplement, especially listing references and such. If I've read a book or seen some kind of an article someplace that has information I want to include, always make sure that you cite those resources. All right, so we're really not going to spend much time on this because I want to make sure we talk about the next topic, but this is just to give you an opportunity to think through what kind of presentation you might be interested in giving. Where are you in your life right now? What kind of presentation would you want to give? And again, if all you ever want to do is be comfortable sitting by a friend and sharing some things that happened in your life, that's great. That's wonderful. If you want more, that's okay too. Wherever you are in your life, it's your story. I should go back through and count how many times I've said your story in this presentation, but it's true, it is. This just gives you an opportunity to write down some thoughts on the different types of presentations that I've mentioned. Now, communication. If we are not communicating our story or what we want to share effectively, then it's going to get lost. There are two main forms of communication, verbal and nonverbal. So I'm going to quickly go through these, and then I will we'll do a little exercise on that as well. For verbal, be concise. This is something I have to really work on. Don't know how I've done today on this one, to be honest, but you want to say what you need to say in as few words as is necessary to be to grab attention, to be expressive. You don't want to ramble like it sounds like I'm doing right now. You want to be concise. You want to stick to the main points of your story, and don't be afraid of silence. Sometimes a little silence is good. It gives everyone a little breather, chance to take a breath, reflect on what you've just said. In fact, silence can be a very meaningful part of your story sharing. Just when it feels natural to do that, to have a moment, to have a pause. And revise as needed. I put this under verbal because sometimes as you're talking and speaking, you look at the clock and you think, uh-oh, how long have I been talking now? Or it's like, whoops, I'm way over time. You need to kind of be prepared to revise as you're going through the presentation as needed. Okay, so that's kind of verbal. Nonverbal. Now, this is a place where some people may get very uncomfortable. The key to nonverbal communication is to be yourself and to relax. Okay, if you get nervous, that's okay. But relax, be natural. Now, for me, I talk with my hands. That's something that I do. And as long as I'm not just going crazy, it works for me because it's a natural thing for me to want to use my hands. If you don't want to use your hands, that's okay. But I really encourage you to try to at least make some motions at some time, because it does keep the audience, your listeners, it keeps their attention on you. Okay, it's warming, it's welcoming to use your hands at times. Maintaining eye contact. When I speak, and this goes along with working the room as well. When I speak, I like to look around the room. I want every single person in that room to know that I am talking to them personally. Same thing here. I'm talking to you personally. I really want you to share your stories. I want to help you with that as much as I can. I don't have all the answers. I'm sure some of you may have lots of ideas and suggestions, and please put them in the chat, or we can talk about that after this portion of the presentation. What are some other ideas that you might have? I think eye contact, making this personal, is what makes it so meaningful. So look at the people who are listening to you. Work the room. If you have a mic attached to you, or if you can carry one with you, walk a little bit around the room. It's really important, especially in sharing your story. It's important to make it personal, because it's very personal for you. And you, in sharing, are inviting that person to join you in that story. You're inviting them to be a part of your recovery. You're welcoming them, and you're encouraging them to maybe think about their own stories. So as we communicate, there are some few tips that I want to share. First of all, starting strong. After or before the intro, is there something humorous you can start with? Maybe it's not really appropriate to start with something humorous, and that's okay too. Personally, I'm not very good at that. I don't tell jokes really. When I start, I maybe do the second one starting with good news that I'm living a healthy life, or I grab the audience's attention. One time I started a presentation by saying, "Hi, I'm Carolyn Cooper. Once upon a time," and started telling a story. There are ways that you can get attention. Again, it all depends on if you're sitting beside a friend or in a small group or standing on a stage. That partially determines how you begin your presentation. But if you are in a more formal setting, start strong. Grab their attention. Let them know right from the beginning that you have something to say. Then show your passion. What part of your story are you the most passionate about? Is it that program that you took? Is it the Bible study you went through? Is it the friend that you met? What is it about your story that you are most passionate about sharing? And maybe can you use it as a theme throughout? For example, I've said encourage others a lot. That's because I am so passionate about encouragement and encouraging others, and I've been encouraged. I have a personal mission statement to bring encouragement for life in a complicated world. That's my personal mission statement, to bring encouragement for life in a complicated world. Encouragement. So that's why you've heard me say that over and over and over. That's important for me. What do you have in your story that you want to emphasize throughout sharing? Then summarize. I've tried to kind of summarize little sections as we've gone along, to build on them as we've gone along. That's very beneficial and effective, to summarize sections or to recap, things like that. Not spending a lot of time on that, but just to refresh the listener as you're going through. Depending on how long of a presentation it is, they may need to have those little reminders. You've sat in presentations after presentations after presentations, and after a while, your brain starts getting foggy. Doing little reminders, summaries of what you've talked about is very beneficial. So we've talked about sharing your story, preparing your story, creating a presentation, all of these things. What I think is really important for us to do now is to sign off on the recorded version or recorded session here and have some interaction. Please put questions in the chat, put comments. Let's go through some of these ideas on sharing your story together. I thank you so much for being here today. And I want to thank you for your courage in being here. It's not easy to share our story. Like I said, I waited several years. There were people in my life who knew nothing about what was going on with me at all for several years. And some people still don't know because it wasn't necessary for me to share it with them. And that's okay too. Sharing your story is personal. It's personal for you. It's personal for the people who are going to be listening. And so thank you again for being here. Please let me know if you ever have any questions, if you have suggestions. I'm very happy to help encourage you to share your stories. Thank you.
Good morning. How is everyone? Thank you so much for tuning into the presentation. I really hope I've inspired some of you to share your story if you haven't done that before. One of the comments I see is from my good friend Jane, and she says, "May I include to remind yourself that it is about the audience?" And definitely, it is about the audience. I think I probably emphasized that it is you and your story, but the purpose is sharing with the people that you want to share with. So, any other questions or comments about the putting a presentation together or speaking to others? I'd be interested in hearing how many of you have had an opportunity to share your story. Anyone else enjoy sharing their story, whether it's with one or two people or with groups? I know some of you have shared your story during this conference. Any thoughts? Okay, so let's think about this. Um, think about that kind of that outline. Oh, someone says Bruce says he shared in the schools. Fantastic. Boy, nowadays kids really need to hear that message of hope, don't they? Michelle has shared with friends. Like I said, I think as I was growing up, I had a few friends. I didn't have a lot of friends, but most of them had no clue what I was going through. And when I did finally share with my high school friend, she was shocked and she was so disappointed that I did not feel I could confide in her. But, I wasn't ready. Just wasn't ready. Carol has had a chance to share. Alicia has been able to share. Oh, she's a peer support specialist too. Good for you, Alicia. I really love being a certified peer specialist. Relatability is so important, Carol says. And that is true. Especially if you're talking to someone who may have a mental illness or a disability of some kind, it's kind of nice to let them know you kind of understand what they're going through. Everybody's journey is different, but relating to the people you're talking to is very important. Sharing with a small group of peers, that is a very powerful way of sharing. Oh, celebrate recovery. That's good. That's a wonderful program. Shared via email. Good idea. Shared with coworkers. I've had a chance to do that a little bit too. And Carol's a CPS. Very good. And thank you for your kind comments. I really want this to be something beneficial, so you will feel comfortable starting to get to that point that you can share. Well, I know our time is running low. I'm not sure when they're going to break in and get back to our conference in the next session. So again, I want to thank you. I don't know that I left my email anywhere for you, but Christina has my contact information. If any of you would like to talk with me more personally about putting together a presentation or how to share or thoughts about what content is important, you can email me. Um, my my email address is C as in cat Cooper. That's CCOOPER 628 at gmail.com. Another CPS, Jacqueline. I think I've seen some others in there too. This is a great place for us to keep up with what's going on in the world of mental health and disabilities and such. Christina has put in my email address there. Like I said, please reach out if you have any questions or any comments to share. I really want to be a resource for you as far as speaking and sharing. Thanks again. I think my time is up. And so enjoy the rest of this conference. I know that you will benefit from it. I have benefited greatly from all the information that I've heard so far.